In this episode, I talk with Glenn Gardone. He is the USA Country Director at Red Chocolate. I actually got to try some Red Chocolate. It was fantastic, and definitely look them up and definitely listen to the episode. He is a very smart guy. He has some very unique experiences. He walks us through those unique experiences and kind of what he's learned along the way. A few of the main points that we've talked about. He talks about finding your passion. We talk a lot about how, you don't usually find your passion in college, but some people do, but some people don't find their passion until, their 50s. So it takes a while to find that passion, find the things that you're really excited about. We also talked about a principle called punching in the mud. And then we also talked about how, in his experience, how has the consumer changed over time, especially, over COVID. So a lot of great points that we talk about in this podcast episode. Definitely listen to it if you're interested in finding your passion or getting some tips on how to find your passion. And then also just general business tips of how to be a better business leader, a better business founder, and how to grow as a leader, as a founder.
I'm in my 50s, and honestly, until I was in my 40s, I never found my passion. So I always tell people, if you don't have your passion at 20, don't worry about it. If you don't have it at 30, don't worry about it.
I love that advice.
Keep the journey going.
Hey everyone, we are here with Glenn Gardone. Glenn is the President and USA Country Director of Red Chocolate. Thanks for being here with me.
Well, Tyler, thank you for having me. It's greatly appreciated. I hope I can give out a couple of good nuggets out there to your audience, and I don't bore them too much. That's my goal today.
Oh yeah, no, I don't worry about that. Well, perfect. So yeah, let's get started with Red Chocolate. There's a kind of a tagline you have with Red Chocolate. What is it, and how did you get started with them?
It's an interesting story. So Red Chocolate, we're a European crafted chocolate. All of our products are made in our facility in Europe. Our tagline being guiltless indulgence. They call it healthy chocolate. I hate that term. There's no such thing as a healthy chocolate. Chocolate's indulgent. And if you only eat chocolate, guess what? It's not good for you. So we like to call it smart indulgence. So you're going to indulge. Everybody should indulge. We just think you should indulge a little smarter. And the whole idea behind Red Chocolate, very simply, is it's no sugar added. We actually use melon sugars, which are natural sugars. So, God forbid those that have any type of diabetes, if you took your blood glucose, ate a serving of our product and took your blood glucose again, it wouldn't raise. So that's just one piece. We're crafted using non-GMO ingredients, we're kosher, blah, 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 blah. In other words, we're freaking awesome. I'll put it at that, okay? And yes, I do work for the company, but I also am a chocoholic. I don't know if you see my shirt. I'm an unapologetic chocoholic, brother. And I have been for my entire life. I didn't just, by joining the team here, because I love chocolate, because I love the feeling it gives me. And honestly, if I'm in a good mood, I eat a little chocolate. If I'm in a little rougher mood, guess what? I eat a little more chocolate. You know what I mean? And, the great thing about being with a company, there's always some chocolate sitting around, so you always got yourself some red chocolate. But you asked how I started, which it was interesting. So in my career, I actually started in corporate America. I was employee number XXXXX. I'm ex-Kellogg, ex-Pepsi, ex-Coke. So decent size, had an array of roles, whether it be finance, sales, marketing. So I really got a chance to work with some amazing people. And so that's really what built my foundation, so to speak. So one of the last roles I had was actually running a pretty decent size of business for Del Monte Foods, over $1 billion, a couple of hundred people within my group that I had responsibility for and reported into, higher up in the organization. And a friend of mine, a good friend of mine who I had actually known from a prior role, had an opportunity to start a kids cereal. And so what we did was I worked with them, and that really started my entrepreneurial bent. And we'll talk about that in a minute, and that'll hopefully delve back into it. But the idea was that that's what started my entrepreneurial journey. Fast forward 15 years, and I actually just sold my 5th company. I was part of a team or led the team that sold 5 other companies. And so I honestly didn't know what I wanted to do. I'm in my 50s, and honestly, till I was in my 40s, I never found my passion. So I always tell people, if you don't have your passion at 20, don't worry about it. If you don't have it at 30, don't worry about it.
I love that advice.
Keep the journey going, because you will find your passion. And believe me, if somebody said, hey, Glenn, when you're in your 50s, you're going to help run a chocolate organization, I'd be like, you're out of your mind. No, of course that's not going to be me. And look at me now, loving every minute.
Yeah.
So,
there you go.
So we had sold that organization, and I really didn't know what I wanted to do. And what was interesting was when I was part of that first team that sold our first business, I remember sitting at the table, and it was with a PE group that was buying us. And he said, "So Glenn, what are you going to do now?" I said, "Honestly, I don't know. I didn't expect to be out of a job in 18 months. He said, "Well, just so you know, on this side of the business, the whole idea is to be out of a job as quick as possible because it means you're doing the right thing. So when you're going to leave, just make sure it's a soft landing." So I wasn't sure what I was going to do. Again, I didn't want to deal with the next widget, so to speak. I had options, but nothing really excited me. And so I had actually gotten a call. We're owned by two families, both multiple generation master chocolate makers. It's what they do. And they had crafted it, and I knew Red because I've been fortunate and blessed enough that I have done a lot of traveling in my life, and I've been on almost every continent except for Antarctica. And I knew Red, and I knew the brand quite well because it's highly popular. I mean, we're in 26 countries. And so they had called, and so they had said, "Hey, would you mind meeting with us? We're looking at coming into the U.S., and your name's popped up a few times as a person that could help with the day-to-day and understanding what it takes to, quote-unquote," as I do my air quotes, "Americanize the company." And I said, "Sure." So I drove out to New York and met with the team, the group, and it was a 4-hour meeting. And I spent the first 3.5 hours, and this is no lie, I spent the first 3.5 hours explaining to them why they didn't want to come in the United States. Because I explained, you got a great brand, you got an awesome company, you got good people working for you. I know everybody looks at America with, huge dollar sign eyes, but you know what? This country will eat you up and spit you out if you're not careful, if you don't know what you're doing. And, why take the chance? And they said, after 3.5 hours, the person who became my boss, who's one of the spokespeople for one of the families, said, "So are you done?" I said, "Yeah, I'm done." And she looked at me, she said, "So when do you want to start?" And I started laughing. I said, "Julia, you're either out of your mind or you know something I don't. And either way, this could be a lot of fun." And I'm glad I said yes. And really, that's how I joined. So from that point, it took 6 months to really build the day-to-day operations, the supply chain system, the finance team, marketing, our sales organization. It really was just building all those different pieces together to be able to build what we've become today. So it's been an exciting ride.
Yeah, congrats. That's really exciting. And I will say you've done a great job. So I actually got some of Red Chocolate, and I don't know if it's like a typical American thing or maybe just me as like a kind of business owner. Like I look at these things, but my first thought was like, okay, they're trying to go for a European vibe. I didn't know you guys were actually based in Europe or started out of Europe. So I was like, okay, I need to dig into this. Like, okay, are they actually in Europe, or are they just trying to pretend, give that vibe? And so I was looking at the company address, and I saw the distributed by and like all this stuff. But that's really cool. Like, you guys actually are coming from family of chocolate makers in Europe.
Yeah,
Awesome.
it's funny you mention that, because when I looked at the packaging, again, being a European package, one of the things I really noticed was the fact that, on it doesn't say non-GMO, because, we're made with all non-GMO ingredients. And so when I brought it to the team, I said, "Guys, we got to put the non-GMO logo on our package." And they said, "Why? Everything's non-GMO." I'm like, "Yeah, in Europe it is, not in America. In America, that's big." So again, it's those day-to-day pieces. And I always tell people, whenever you start to, start your journey, always make sure you understand the details behind it. I'll be the first one to admit I am not the smartest one at the table, and I don't want to be the smartest one at the table, but I make sure that since I'm sitting at the table that I can offer up some valuable insight. And so, I always try to make sure that the people that are at that table, A, they always have a voice because they're at that table, but B, more importantly, they're going to be a lot better at what they bring to the table than I will. And when you get this collective of minds, that's how you can become successful. And in the face of situations and issues that you weren't expecting, it's always great to have those great minds around. And, as we were talking earlier, sometimes you have those issues pop up that there's no way to prepare for. I mean, we launched this brand 5 months before a global pandemic.
Yeah. And so, let's go right into that. So we talked a little bit about marketing. You had to kind of shift off, obviously, a lot of the marketing, the packaging to fit an American vibe. But then now you're kind of in a new America 5 months into your company, or starting here, with the pandemic. So kind of describe that experience. And then, of course, just note down like what changed or hasn't changed because of that pandemic. Like, what have you changed?
Good question. Well, I call it punching through the mud. It's the best way for me to explain it because no matter what happens, and it happens to all of us, I'll do a quick baseball analogy. If you get up at the plate and you hit the ball 4 out of 10 times, you are one of the best baseball players ever to play the game, and that means you've
Yeah.
missed 6 times. Do that in
Love that
business, and
analogy.
you're going to be out of business in less than a year. So
Yeah.
take a knee, it's okay, and relax, catch your breath, but get back up, and that's why I call it punching in the mud. So probably a question that's asked of me often is how has the consumer changed? Again, I've been doing it a long time, and my answer is always the same. The consumer has not changed. The consumer expects a value for what they are buying or purchasing. And when I say value, I don't mean value as in price. It could be price for somebody. It could be what kind of time saver. How does this make a positive impact in my life? How does it make a positive impact in what I believe in? Whatever that quote unquote value message is to the individual, that's the need you have to satisfy. And hopefully your business model is there to help satisfy that need. And there's plenty of those people that want to have their needs satisfied. What has drastically changed is the message delivery. And so, when you think about it, we were a nation of perusers, as I say. We all went into our local, grocery store, big box retailer, anywhere you want. We peruse. We like to peruse. It's what we do.
Yeah,
And that
definitely.
stopped. If you think about it, the perusing stopped. And so therefore,
Yeah.
as a brand that maybe wasn't as known as other brands, you have to get the message out to them sooner. And we all know how quick life is right now, especially with our phones, and you're thumbing past ads and things like that. So
Yeah.
you'll find in any situation, there are always 50 different people that'll tell you, I've got the way to solve it. And really, one of your roles as a business owner, as a business leader, as a person that's in charge of the daily operations, it's your role to understand of those 50, which 5 really do work, and which 2 of those 5 can you afford, and can you get the return? Because again, business is like a plant. You can overwater it, which can kill it. You can underwater it, which would kill it. So it's just being able to put the right amount of water, the right amount of sunlight. Because business, while it's not a living, breathing entity, it is an entity that continues to grow. And the living, breathing part are all the people that you have within your organization that help it grow.
Yeah, cool. I love it. So, a few things I want to talk about. So, like you said, what has really changed is how you reach your consumers, right? So, have you guys, this is kind of out of just curiosity, have you guys made a noticeable shift to, social media, paid ads, anything like that?
Yes, I'm going to tell you, we've moved 80% of our budget. We have, for the size of company we are, with the amount of time we've been in, we have a budget that's probably the size of more developed organizations, because that's how much we believe in it. Yeah, so beforehand, we had, of course, we have a pretty decent social media presence, but we have found that to be able to satisfy the need of discussion and to continue the discussion, we have definitely invested and over invested in our social media platforms, both from a messaging standpoint, but also from a quote unquote ease of conversation, so that consumers can talk to us easier than they have in the past. And it's, whether it be through our texting, whether it be through our other platforms, through our different tools that we use, we've always wanted to make sure. One of the things I always impress upon the team, whether it be sales, whether it be marketing, is let's make sure we have these conversations with our consumers, because the consumer will let you know. The consumer's going to let you know what they think of you. The consumer's going to let you know what they think of the way you have conversations with them. And it's all the way down to, the digital assets we use. It's important for us to, again, relay the message of the fact that we are European crafted, because there is a major difference between European chocolate and American chocolate. Some American chocolates are 60%, refined sugar.
Yeah.
You're better off taking a pound of sugar and pouring it in your face, and you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You throw a cocoa bean or two,
Right.
and you're about the same. So, it's just being able to get that message. So, absolutely, we've got a very dynamic shift in the way it is. And we've pulled funding from other areas that really don't fit our needs now.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And we're experiencing that as well. Like, I heard our budget is probably significantly less than yours, but we totally have that same mentality. Like, yes, we want to water the plant. I love that analogy, water the plant just the right amount. And so, and there's constant adjusting, right? Because the environment changes, like, pandemic changes. And so that plant is under different stressors and whatever. So you always need to be adjusting, what you're inputting. And so, like, even for us, in the past 3 months, we've started like 3 different marketing efforts and realized 0 of them worked, but then there's one other random thing that we started doing is actually working. Yeah. So it's so funny how those things happen. Like, yeah, you're right. You might have 50 ideas, try the ones you think have the most promise, but even then you still need to be adaptable, and just like a plant, you just got to adjust everything. Hey everyone, in this quick break, I wanted to give a shout out to Coconut VA. They are making this podcast possible. This podcast is hosted by me, but a lot of the back end work is actually done by a Coconut VA. I'm the co-founder of Coconut VA, and we find Filipino virtual assistants for US companies. So if you've got a proven business model, you're growing, you need help with operations, general admin, lead generation, or really any help around the business, you could probably hire a Coconut VA. You can find a link on my podcast page, thebtspodcast.com, or at coconutva.com. My podcast is a great example of how a Coconut VA could help you. I've done the work to systematize my podcast, systematize the production process, and now I can bring in a Coconut VA to actually execute that process. If you're ready to delegate tasks, you're ready to hire a Coconut VA.
And the biggest thing, unless you're a $100 million company, if you think about marketing and what the basis of marketing is a journey. I mean, the idea is to send that brand message and to be able to cultivate it, so to speak. Well, as a small company, you don't have that kind of time. So I tell people that doesn't mean you don't do marketing. It just means you need to do immediate marketing. You'll do marketing, and we still do that. We still sprinkle in what I would call immediate marketing versus brand awareness marketing, because I've seen people that have a great idea, and they try to do, long-term brand marketing. Well, it's great to worry about 12 months from now, but if you're not around in 6 months, it doesn't make a difference what 12 months comes from. So I always tell people to, make sure that you tamper it, because you'll see even the big guys. It's funny. I was at a meeting, and it was a year-end meeting for one of the largest retailers in the world. And somebody had raised their hand because we got a chance to ask questions of the folks in charge. And they said, so what are you looking at from a long-term perspective? And he smiled and laughed. He goes, well, I know most of you from a long-term perspective, you're wondering what we're going to do in 3 years. Long-term for us is what are we going to do in 15 to 20 years? So if you want to know what we're going to do in 3 years, you probably should have asked about it 10 years ago. It's interesting when you think of it that way. And it really dawned on me, like, wow, yeah. I mean, it would be amazing to be able to plan out that far. But even if you plan out that far, I think that nobody expected us to go through this dynamic change. Video conferencing, for instance. If you think about, video conferencing started 15 years ago, and you do pieces and parts of it. Yeah, we all learned how to do it real quick over the last 2.5 years.
Oh yeah.
Now, it's funny. So I was traveling internationally just before the pandemic hit. And I remember coming over the border, coming back to the U.S., and the discussions that were happening about it. And honestly, I hadn't even heard about it. And so when we got back, and I remember sitting there and sitting with my team and starting to discuss this situation of the pandemic. And, we sat there and we decided at that point, okay, what is it that we truly need to look at? What do we need to make sure that we have our hand on the, quote unquote, the pulse to ensure that we're continuing to move the business forward? Because, we're working with big folks all over the country, and, we had a lot of people that were focused on something different to be able to help their business, which I understood completely, but yet I still had to make sure our team was focused, hence the punching through the mud. How do we make sure we still get our fair share of mind?
Definitely. Cool. Well, that kind of leads me to another section that we wanted to talk about is you've mentioned, you've liked to talk about kind of an entrepreneurial mindset. And so what has been your experience? Like, obviously you've been in, kind of corporate jobs, and, you're in this fairly big organization with another company in Europe. How have you guys still been able to keep more of an entrepreneurial mindset? I don't know if you guys follow like lean startup or any specific methodology, but, how is it being an entrepreneur and more of an intrapreneur, an entrepreneur in a bigger company?
Well, it's a good question. It's an excellent question. So what we try to do is we try to ensure that, again, we have a quote unquote voice at the table, because, what we do here in the U.S. is much different than what I'll do, for instance, in the U.K. And so the last thing you want to try to do is homogenize the business. We've seen people here buy up smaller companies and try to homogenize them into their business model. You think back, Snapple, for instance. I had a chance to be part of that team a long, long ago. And, I remember, there was a personality to that brand. And I remember being in a meeting, and the statement that was made to me was, Glenn, people don't eat bagels in the Midwest. Meaning, you know what, we're going to make it like the Gatorade of everywhere else. And they went from 1.2 billion down to 300 million. So I think what you have to do is you have to keep your personality. So part of my role is to ensure that our voice is heard and understood, and why we want to do what we want to do. So, again, whether it's an entrepreneur and you're starting your own thing, the idea is to look, I say a couple of things. If you're going to be an entrepreneur, you're going to work harder than you ever have for less money than you ever have. And it's going to be that way for a couple of years. Yes, there are people that, would be against that and, will be successful right off the bat, and fabulous, good for them. But the majority of us, we're going to sloth through it. We're going to continue to punch through the mud. And so what I tell people is understand your business model, understand why you are doing what you're doing. If you don't truly believe in it, and when I say truly believe in it, I mean if you're not willing to spend 100 hours a week doing it, there are going to be Saturdays where your friends are going to be hanging out and they're going to be having fun, and guess what? You're not. You're either going to be in your storefront, in your home office, in your office, working with customers, working with vendors, because, the job of an entrepreneur is really, again, to own that plant. And if you're the owner of that plant, and especially when you start to bring employees in, there are people that, I'm lucky enough that the Red family here, they are so passionate about what they do. And I think that also helps us in what we try to do, being our own piece within a bigger organization. I can teach a person computers. I can teach you how to sell. I can teach you financing. I can teach you, GAAP accounting principles. I don't know how to teach passion. I've been doing this for a long time. I had a great mentor who once told me the road is paved with intellectual derelicts. And if you think about it, it's true. I mean, there are a lot of smart people out there, but if you don't have the passion and the desire and the will, and again, for me, it was something completely different, what I wanted. And that was my goal for my quote unquote success. Others are completely different. You have to decide, again, what does the success mean to you when you get there to look at it? And again, don't worry about not having your passion. Like I said, it took me a long time. It took me 20 years to find mine.
Yeah, I love it. And I mean, I think there's 2 points I wanted to emphasize. Like, first off, the time it takes to find your passion. Like, I have no idea even if I've found mine. I super enjoy. I am so happy with what I'm doing currently. But I'm sure I'll find other things that excite me, maybe even more, or just as much. And like, I think another piece that I wanted to hit on is, the passion or the motivation can be different for so many people. Mm-hmm. And I think some of us maybe kind of stumble on that when we compare to other people, because like even my co-founder, like him and I have kind of different motivations or different life goals. We're in different, stages of life, and all of these different things that are just different about each of our unique lives. Yeah. And so it's okay if your motivation or your passion doesn't line up with the next guy's, right? Because I want things personal. Different from what he wants. Yeah,
it's exactly. Totally personal. And you're right, because we don't know where each other's motivation stems from. And there's no good or bad as long as it's yours and it's the belief that you hold. I couldn't agree with you more. Again, my goal, and it's a simple goal, is to be able to go to bed on a Sunday night happy that I'm going to wake up Monday morning and go to work. But if you think about that, it took me a lot of years, and I had some great, like I said, great partners in business. I had some great roles in business and, financially successful and all of that, hoo-ha, but I really wasn't happy. I did it. Yeah. I had to do it. That was part of my drive of wanting to be the best I could be. But the fact is, it took me a long time to be able to go through. And I don't look at anything as a waste. Everything got me to where I am today. Every piece, every meeting, every opportunity, every understanding. I can't sit here and say, oh, when I did this, it was just an abject failure. Pretty much like you were saying. We try some things, they don't work. You don't continue doing them expecting them to work. You say, okay, why didn't it work? How do we fix it? How do we make it better? Or do we just literally take this and throw it in the garbage and we move on to something else, which we've all been there for those too.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, there's such a balance too, because I can't even remember exactly the words right now, but it's like, oh, I think it's preserve or pivot. Or persevere and pivot.
Mm-hmm.
Do you continue to persevere down this hard path? Do you try to make it to the end? Is there light at the end of the tunnel? Or is there no light at the end of the tunnel and you really just need to pivot? I think there's, like, I don't know if anybody teaches that perfectly because it's such a balance in each and every situation.
Yeah.
But that's something to keep in mind. Like, sometimes you need to persevere, sometimes you need to pivot. And that's just good to keep in mind, that you should always be evaluating that dichotomy.
You have to. No, absolutely. And again, a very personal nature, to persevere and pivot. And what I always tell people is, at least for me, I always erred on the side of caution. Even I invest on the side of caution. I will overinvest in a business, in a role. I will overwater the plant a little bit because I know it's going to be some hot, sunny days over the next couple of days. And so I want to make sure the plant has enough water. So, again, that's just part of, your growth as an individual, as a business person. These are things that you really, that you work on, that hopefully you want to work on and continue to work on, and will make you successful in your own career path.
Cool. Love it. Well, perfect. Well, thank you so much, Glenn. Is there any other questions, any other advice or tips and tricks you want to give to our audience before we wrap up?
I would say probably the most important thing is just to keep your eyes open. Understand the surroundings around you. There's always a way to learn from something going on. We're all going to go through certain things in our life, man, like I said, where you got to take a knee. And it's okay to take a knee. Don't feel bad. Don't go into a business thinking you know everything. That's the worst thing you could do, because you don't know everything. I have met a person that knows. I've met a lot of people that think they know everything, and they were usually quite wrong. And most of the time, around the table, they were not the smartest at the table, but they would tell you they were. Don't be one of those people, man. Be humble. Yeah. Know that there's some brilliant people out there that want to see you successful. Know there's people out there that are just like you that want to see you successful. And those are the people you surround yourself with. And the ones that want to try and knock you down, as soon as you learn they're going to knock you down, push them out of the way. Don't let it be part of your journey. If they get into your head, blame yourself, because you let them in your head. If there's only enough room for yourself and what you need to do, keep it at that. Yeah. So
there you go. Perfect. And I mean, there's a phrase actually I heard recently that goes along well with that. It's be a learn-it-all, not a know-it-all. Constantly be learning. Don't be the guy that knows it all, right?
I love that. I'm going to steal that. I like that.
Yeah, go ahead. I stole it from someone else. Keep it going.
Right on.
Well, cool. Awesome. So yeah, I mean, just to kind of wrap things up. So if you want to get in contact with Glenn, visit LinkedIn, Glenn Gardone, or visit their website, red-chocolate.com. And thanks for being here with me again.
Well, Tyler, thank you, and I appreciate it. And again, anybody wants to reach out, as Tyler said, you feel free to find us. Find me on LinkedIn, Glenn Gardone. If you want to reach out to myself, I answer everybody. And then, you can always find us at red-chocolate.com. Find out about the company, find out about the brand, or even if you want to send a note to me there, feel free to send a note to me there. I'm available there. Anybody on my team. So, Tyler, thanks again. I appreciate it. And like I said from the beginning, I hope everybody in your audience can listen to this and maybe pick up on a few nuggets.
Yes, definitely. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tyler.
Thank you for listening to Behind the Startup. If you like the show, make sure to follow the podcast and leave a review.